Hello and welcome everyone, I'm Madals and today I've got game number 1 of a best of 3. It's from the Russian StarCraft 2 League and it is a Terran versus a Zerg, and the map will not be familiar to many people as it's one made specifically for the Russian StarCraft 2 League, and I'll talk about that after I've introduced the players. Down in the bottom left position spawning as the blue Terran player from Team Acer, it is MMA, and his opponent in the top right, the red Zerg from VP BenQ, it is sLivko. Now, the map is Electronic Circuit, and it is a fairly unusual map, mainly because you've got this really ridiculously tight choke leading into your natural base. You've then also got this high ground area, which you can come in, which also leads into your natural base and is walled off. So it's one of these maps where I say they're both natural bases. Generally speaking, most players, well, I don't know really, because in some ways you'll want to take this one, because yes, there's the wall off here, but then you could also take this one quite happily, because this is quite a tight choke and a bit more normal. So I'd say it's a quick 3-base map. That's one thing that's 100% for sure. Your 4th base is usually going to be this one round to the side, just because it's the closest one. If you try and expand down here, it's a little way out of the way, and that's going to be a bit more awkward to deal with. So I think that's the kind of progression path we will be headed with. The centre's also quite cool because this watchtower is somewhat isolated by these two buildings, so that's quite a nice feature. I quite like that. Lots of open space, which isn't going to make too much difference. If there was a Protoss player, then it would. sLivko is going to be coming to take this natural, so that's pretty cool. Meanwhile, we've got the barracks and the gas down for MMA, so he's just busy mining through that gas. Considering the amount of gas he's got down, it's going to be a factory really nice and quick, so it'll be interesting to see what he does with that. Also, it's worth noting that there's not too much dead space actually around this map. There is a bit around the back here you can come in with. You can also come and drop into the 3rd, but that's still not the easiest thing in the world. The 4th is a little more drop vulnerable, and this natural is quite drop vulnerable. But that's something that we may see MMA try and take advantage of and try and do some damage with. But for the moment, we do just have the SCV on his way up. We're going to go in for a little bit of scanning information. This is an all-spawn position map, so it's a 4-spawn position with rotational symmetry, I think it has. I always get confused by this, but I think it's rotational symmetry. So that's all nice and cool looking, everything fine. There's the factory coming down just as to be expected out of MMA, and he's getting his orbital command. It's all looking good. Meanwhile, we do see that sLivko is busy getting down gas, getting down his spawning pool. Hatchery already finished, or about to finish. That just means that he's really just going along the macro Zerg path. Everything looking quite nice and happy, nothing too crazy going. And yeah, as long as he identifies that this is really coming, that the factory's out really quick with the reactor, and there's likely to be some quick aggression, he shouldn't have too much to worry about. This single lone marine going to come up here. Not going to be able to snipe off the Overlord because obviously the Overlord's up on the high ground. So it's just going to chill up there. Having seen the marine up, knows that the barracks has been down for a while, and that's all cool. The SCV is unfortunately going to die to these Zerglings, which is never too fun for SCVs like that. No 3rd yet from sLivko. He has pulled 2 of the drones out of gas. Now he's got up to 100, so he can start speed. There we go, all looking good. But the SCV just being forced to retreat back. We do see the starport also coming down, so it's going to be a little bit of drop play coming down from MMA. A bit of Hellion dropping. Probably more likely to be Hellions poking in the front, Marines in the main, or some variety of that, because it's usually an effective way to run with it. But the danger of this map and Hellions is just as sLivko's done. Put some Zerglings here, they can't get up into the main too easily. They'll get blocked and take a good amount of damage. So something definitely that MMA is going to be aware of. He will have looked at this map even though it's not too common, and will be planning his builds around that and how he wants to deal with it. Still no expansion though, so sLivko is taking a nice little lead in terms of the economy. His income looking quite nice. These Hellions are just going to try and run up there but meet those Zerglings. Of course they can only fly one at a time in those positions as well, so instead going to have to try and go over a few of those drones. The important thing here for MMA is conservation of these Hellions, because he's got 2 more coming in, and these first 2 are just poking and prodding, creating a little bit of fear. The medevac is not yet out, so once this pops, it's obviously going to get a little bit more scary. These Hellions still going to try and poke in, prod a little bit, but the Queen's doing a nice job of just forcing them back, to be honest. There's 3 Queens out in total, not 4, so the injector, the natural, will be slightly delayed because the Queens are a little bit out of position. They come back. The 3rd now being taken by sLivko. Of course, as I mentioned, looking at the map early game, this is a safe 3rd because the rocks are here, and there's also the Overlord position to see if anything tries to break them down. Now, we do have A LabBot X1. That really confused me what on earth that was. But that's actually pretty cool. It looks like a kind of ancient version of a probe. Like Probe 1.0. Or maybe the beta version of the probe. Something like that. Anyway, Hellions coming to drop up into the main base. Zergling's getting pulled back. Nice and quick to deal with it. But there's also Hellions ready to push in at the front. 8 Hellions in total. Going to try and get as much drone damage done as possible. MMA needs to deal with some good drone damage because his own natural was just so heavily delayed. A couple of drones getting taken out here at the natural base. Quite a few more drones are getting taken out. The Lings are getting annihilated. And sLivko actually losing quite a considerable amount. The drones are all lined up in the main. Got to be careful with that. Some hits are coming off. Really quite nice hits as well at the natural base. The Hellions are getting cleaned up, but in the main, that's where a lot of damage is being done. Will any more be able to be taken out? No is the answer. So in grand total, 17 workers killed, and frankly, that is a good number to go down. One Viking doing his job, picking off a queen there. Always good to get a Viking down nice and early. Medevac still being pumped, but from off the back of this, really not too much coming down from MMA. He's just getting his expansion, getting a couple of ye-old Hellbats in, and gonna try and put on a bit more pressure. But yeah, this is still, as far as I'm concerned anyway, a fairly normal game because these Zerglings are going to try and level out the damage done. There's not really too much in the way of defense. The supply depot wall off will prevent them doing too much, but may force a cancel on this orbital command. Ideally MMA will let it finish and then just lift it, but with these Hellbats coming in, shouldn't actually have to even lift it there, and the Zerglings force back. They have damaged that command center quite considerably though, so would be wise to repair that up rather than risk it being an easy target later for a quick little ling run by. Now, we do have third base up and running for sLivko. He's still ahead in the work account, 45 to 31. This Viking still being a bit of a pain. Gonna come in and just confirm that, yep, the third's finished up. It's mining nicely. Pick off any overlords that it can find. Already discovered one. The queens are gonna try and stop it, but the Viking should be able to get the kill and still get away safely. But good transfuse comes down there from sLivko, saving that. And the reason he saved it is because he would have been pretty close to a supply block had he not. Hellbat drop coming in towards the third base. Only 4 drones there, so even if it got all of them, it wouldn't really be devastating, so not much to worry about there, just wasting a little bit of mining time, always frustrating. This Overlord going down though, that's going to be a bit more of a pain because sLivko still only got 4 supply to play with. The drop's coming back in towards the main base because of course MMA does love his drop play. He's also got +1 vehicle weapons coming down, so this is quite a mech heavy style with these 2 additional factories now getting added onto that. So this is all looking really quite comfortable for MMA at the moment. Still needs to try and get his work account up a little bit higher in comparison to that of sLivko, because sLivko's already up at 65. Does lose the medevac. One Hellbat rather is going to get dropped out. It'll also scout the Spire. That's quite a good little spot there, but you can expect a Spire when you are going drop heavy, because the Zerg player is going to want to try and shut this down, because you never really want to keep getting those trades. And actually, MMA is still trading more cost effectively than that of sLivko, just due to these drops being really quite frustrating. The third CC is done too, so that means the bases are equal, and now the pressure is really on sLivko to try and take that fourth and or deal a huge amount of damage. Now the drones are not getting pulled quite quickly enough here, and that means a decent number of them go down. That's actually taking up to 24 workers have been sniped off. That's pretty damn good actually, and really MMA should be quite happy with that. It's leveled out the supply count, the worker supply count a bit more equally. With the mules and the third base up now, actually means that MMA is mining about 300 more minerals per minute than that of sLivko. sLivko does have 1-1 upgrades coming down, +1 vehicle weapons is about to kick in though for these Hellbats, and that means that they're going to start hitting a little bit harder. The second armory coming down, ready to start the 2-1 upgrades very soon. Spore Coolers, they're also on their way down here for sLivko. But already some nice damage has been done. The Viking going to see the 4th base timing, and all of these things put together actually just mean that MMA is really keeping the map dominance, and that's something that's going to be frustrating for sLivko. He can't really apply pressure until these Mutalisks come out in order to be able to shut down the medevacs that keep dropping time and time again, and just keeping all of sLivko's attention on preventing drones dying as opposed to trying to deal any damage of his own. This medevac does get sniped off before the Hellbat goes down, so in credit to sLivko, he is actually doing a really nice job of trying to hold off as much of this pressure as he can, but because it has still done 24 workers worth of damage, it's going to be frustrating. The Mutalisks managed to take out that single lone Viking, but Thor production had already been started because the Spire was scouted pretty much when it was thrown down, which is a really useful scout for MMA, who is starting to look very solid at the moment. He's getting up a nice army, still needs a bit more before he becomes truly scary. Mech forces don't get terrifying until about the 150 plus mark of supply. Then you start seeing those Zerg and going, this is going to be a bit tough to try and take out. Thor there does get a couple of nice shots off, clumping on the Mutalisks. Got to be careful of that. Missile turrets are also coming down here, there, and everywhere. Unfortunately for sLivko, his roach warren hasn't really been utilised very much, and he definitely needs to get out quite a few more roaches if he's wanting to deal with this Thor Hellbat army. And as part of that, his upgrades are also not the way they want to be. We've got the 2 melee upgrades about to get started. And again, not really helping the roaches deal the damage they need, but the Mutalisks trying to get a little bit of damage done. The missile turret stays up, and the Widow Mines have also detonated. The Thor just out of range. That Thor really could do with coming a bit closer, getting blocked by the Hellbats, and the Thor needs to deal with this damage, needs to start trying to pick this off, because SCVs are falling pretty quickly. Only 7 killed so far, but that's 7 more than have been killed before that aggression had come in, and so therefore MMA doesn't really want that to be occurring too much longer. He is sitting here with a good number of missile turrets around the the third and the Thor there, but the 4th base of sLivko is now up and running quite happily. sLivko is also sitting there at 84 drones up against the 62 SCVs, so his economy actually looking quite nice, and the resources lost, only 200 resources difference between them. That isn't enough to really be substantial to warrant the fact that the incomes are pretty equal, and the gas income for sLivko is definitely higher. And talking about gas income, it's allowing sLivko to get down this Hive. He's ready to go and switch into Ultralisks. How do we know it's going to be Ultras? Because the +2 melee attack's coming down. If he wasn't going Ultras, he wouldn't be bothering to get that. It could also be Broodlords, theoretically. The reason that I don't think Broodlords would be the best decision at the moment is because there's already a high Thor count, and also, in addition to that, there's Vikings already down on the field. There's probably going to be some more coming out too. So that's always going to be something you worry about. Ultras, however, deal quite nicely with this composition. The time you want to get lots of Broodlords, I personally think, is if you see a large number of tanks in the composition of the Terran, because that's when you actually need to try and make sure that you can shut those down and force them to unsiege by using the Broodlings. So that's just my thoughts. Of course, Great Aspire and Broodlords are still viable, and it seems that's what sLivko is going to do. He does like going Broodlord anyway, so this is all fine. But this force from MMA is going to be hitting far before that Great Aspire is done. The Hellbats still being a bit of a royal pain. They've got the 2-1 upgrades already done, and they're getting 3-2 on their way too, and that's up against 1-1 currently for sLivko. The Hellbats annihilating this 4th base. They're pushing straight in. They do not care. Drones are falling everywhere, and now MMA is taking the worker lead just due to that. sLivko going to be counter-attacking his Infestors, his Roaches, his Zerglings coming around the side. The Hatchery is going to go down though. The Thor's still here. Widow Mines as well, ready to take out any Banelings that could be coming through. The scan sees precisely what composes of this army. He's busy trying to get down a couple more tanks, a bit of a better position. Going to start sieging up. Some tanks in this position will be absolutely huge, because with the supply depot walled off down, they'll still be able to shell through there, as we can see, but are pretty much unkillable by those Zerglings. Now, the mech force for MMA at the moment is in a bit of a tough position. Notice he's morphing into high impact payload. I don't know if he's scouted the Great Aspire. No, I don't think he has, so just really making sure that he could be safe against that. Changing back out of it again now as I was flicked away, but still, the Great Aspire is now done. Can the Broodlords get out in time? And critically, can the Broodlords actually deal enough damage? Because Viking production is started back up. The scans are constantly coming down, and by these scans, by these CCs that are also now in production too, actually MMA is getting thoroughly ahead. His 8 workers up, plus the mules, and some good Thor hits go down on these mutas. 1 or 2 get killed. Scans just making sure that they see anything that could be coming. This army can't safely move out because of how many units are available to sLivko, but what he can do is try and keep the pressure on and delay any additional expansions while he gets down the tech required to deal with those Broodlords. So Hellbat drop coming in towards the natural base. Once again, some good hits come off on these drones, and actually quite a few do get taken down here once more. The Roaches are getting into a bit of a tough position. They're going to try and engage on these tanks while they are on siege, but of course a good number of Thors at the back are also going to help with this. The tanks are sieging up half of them, and that's going to really push back these Roaches. Simultaneously, the 2 Hellbats in the natural base still haven't been dealt with. MMA now with the 17 worker lead sees the Broodlord, but there's already Viking production ramping up to 4 at a time. There's already these Thors which, knowing that the Mutalisks have been taken out, can switch into high impact payload and actually deal with them fairly well. But the tanks, that's where the problem's going to be. And here we go, high impact payload has now been triggered, and this is where suddenly the Broodlords don't deal so well. The tanks will have to unsiege though, unless they want to keep shelling their own units. That's really where the Broodlords excel, is stopping the siege tanks from being too much of a threat. But they're not that great against Thors anymore, and that's really what we're seeing here. Is yes, they are going to push back this force for the moment, but once we add in those Vikings too, actually, that's where suddenly this mech force becomes really scary. The Viking count still being produced 4 at a time, but sLivko, he's trying to get the complete surround. He is pushing forward with these Broodlords slowly and steadily. Is MMA going to be able to deal with this? Because yes, he's on equal bases, but there's this hidden fourth now just coming into effect. The Broodlords are getting transfused. Where is the anti-air? Well, there's some good fungal growth on the Vikings. A couple of infested Terrans getting thrown down, but can they pick them off before, of course, they get killed? Well, a couple of those Vikings are getting very low. One does go down, but the Broodlords forced to retreat. This is where an air-on-air battle could be about to occur. Hellbat Drop still trying to come down here from MMA. We do see that a couple of Overlords just being rallied out to the front here, but it's the Broodlords. They're what really need an answer, and the answer is just a lot of Vikings in case any more Corruptors do come down. A fourth base has now been secured as well by MMA. It's morphing into a planetary fortress, and that means this hidden base down in the bottom right is pretty important because this is actually just keeping the base count equal. There is a fifth base on its way out, but that's still a fair way off, and that's something that obviously MMA always could discover fairly soon. He's still killed a magnificent number of workers this game. 64 workers have been killed, and the number is still growing, and this is what's the problem for sLivko, because he's down on workers to MMA. MMA has still got a magnificent economy. He's still calling down a huge number of mules, and he's mining about 300 gas a minute more as well than sLivko is, and that's going to be hurting. And of course sLivko, he's not even trading that well. He's lost 4,000 more resources more than his opponent, and what that causes is a situation where MMA actually has got a much higher supply, 195 to 157. Very frustrating to be sitting there. Overlord's getting taken out as well by these Vikings. The Viking count is now up to 15. That's going to annihilate these Broodlords, even with the Corruptor support. The fungal growths have to be pretty monumental, and that's the sort of fungal that sLivko needs. He needs to chain these fungals up and try and knock out these Vikings before they knock out the Corruptors and Broodlords. Of course, some good hits from those fungals are going to be very powerful. The Corruptors trying to get focused down as well. The tanks shelling their own units just because of the Broodlings, but the Corruptors are starting to fall in number. Only 3 remain. They're up against a good number of Broodlords. The the Vikings not focused firing aren't picking off the Corruptors quite quickly enough, but there they go. All now down. There's no more fungal growths available on those infestors. That means the Broodlords are starting to take some big fire. Unfortunately as well for sLivko, he's still down in supply. A lot of these, well, this is a damn lot of Overlords just sitting here waiting to get killed off. The Broodlords are going to be able to retreat though. The Viking count has got a bit lower, but simultaneously a nice big drop comes down in the main. If that Greater Spire were to fall, this would be devastating to sLivko. We see that the infestors trying to come forward. We do have the supply lead, a 30 supply lead for sLivko, and the Corruptors may be working away at the medevac, but nothing to do with the tanks. The Greater Spire is going to go down. That means these 6 Broodlords are pretty much all that's going to be there. The Viking count is still rising. Overlords getting taken down exceptionally fast. sLivko starting to lose maximum supply capabilities because of those losses, and the Corruptors still going down. There is the Spore Crawler and the Infestors there, but the Infestors don't really have very much energy, and of course the Spore Crawler only is really super potent against Mutalisks, not against Vikings, so that's something that MMA is going to know, but doesn't want to engage on there unless he has to. He's picked off the Greater Spire. He knows the tech now for sLivko is severely hurting, and he doesn't have to take risks. This bottom right base could be about to get discovered. He sees the edge of creep, and that could trigger him to go over there. The Vikings could even land in this position, and yeah, this is pretty damn good. So GG from sLivko, apparently having some lag issues there because they were playing on EU, but yeah, game number 1 will go to the lovely Mr. MMA. So congratulations to him. If you enjoyed that game, make sure you like the video, leave a cool comment, and of course subscribe, and then flick over to my channel. I'll see you at game number 2 in just a sec.